Welcome to Creative Imperfections. I'm Kelly, and I am so glad you're here. Think of this podcast as your safe place to be your beautifully messy self. Let's dive in. This week, I want to talk about energy. And what I mean by that is the energy that you bring into the room with you. I feel like this is something that doesn't get talked about very often, especially in spaces that focus more on strategy and performance or doing things the right way. And there is something that sits beneath all of this, and that's the energy you bring into a room and how that changes the room before you ever even say a word. I don't mean this in some mystical or abstract way, but in a very real, very human way. People feel you before they fully hear you. They pick up on your pace, your presence, your level of ease or tension, your certainty or hesitation. It may be subtle, but it's there. And most of the time, we're so focused on what we're going to say next or what we're going to do, how we're going to perform, that we often forget something else is already speaking for us. Your internal state is already communicating. There have been moments in my life where I walked into a room prepared, organized. On paper, I was ready. But internally, not so much. Maybe slightly anxious, overthinking, trying to get everything perfect. And even if I said all the right things, something felt off. Not necessarily wrong, but disconnected. Like I was working harder than I needed to. And then there have been other moments where I walked into a space with less preparation, maybe no preparation, less certainty about the outcome, but more grounded in myself, more present, more settled, and everything just flowed differently. The conversations felt easier, the decisions were clearer, people responded to me differently. Nothing external had changed, but internally something had. And that shift changed everything. We tend to believe that outcomes are driven by what we do, the words we choose, the actions we take, the strategy we follow. But there's something happening underneath all of that. The way you show up energetically shapes how those things land. If you're tense, people feel tension. If you're scattered, people around you feel scattered. But if you're grounded, the people around you feel grounded. This doesn't happen consciously. It's not even in a way that most people can articulate, but it happens in a way that influences how other people respond to you. And this isn't about being on all the time or performing some version of confidence. In fact, it's actually quite the opposite. It's about being with yourself enough that you don't need to perform. Performance often creates pressure, but presence is what creates connection. There's a big difference between walking into a room trying to prove something and walking into a room being anchored in who you are. One requires constant effort, the other creates space. And people respond to space. They respond to someone who isn't rushing, who isn't forcing, who isn't trying to control every outcome. Someone who can just listen, adjust, or respond in real time instead of pushing through a script. That kind of presence can't be faked for long. It comes from how you're actually feeling internally, from how connected you are to yourself in that very moment. And this is where things get interesting, because your internal state isn't random. It's shaped by everything that came before that moment. Your thoughts, your expectations, your level of pressure, your self-talk, your nervous system. If you've been telling yourself you need to get it right, you're going to walk into that room tight. If you've been questioning your worth, you're going to walk in there slightly guarded. If you've been grounded in your values, you'll walk in differently. The room doesn't change you first. You change the room. And that doesn't mean you control everything that happens. It means you influence the starting point. you are setting a tone, even if it's subtle. I think about this a lot in moments where the stakes feel higher, whether it's a meeting, a conversation, a decision, a creative opportunity, and how easy it is to focus outward, to think about the other people, the outcome, the expectations. But the most important work usually happens before you ever walk in. It's the moment where you pause long enough to notice where you are internally. Are you rushed? Are you bracing for something? Are you trying to prove something? Are you already anticipating a negative outcome? Because whatever is happening inside you is going with you. And sometimes the shift isn't about changing the situation. It's about settling yourself before you enter it. Not fixing everything, not forcing confidence, just softening enough to be present. Slowing your pace, taking a breath, letting go of the need to control how it unfolds. That small internal adjustment can completely change how the moment feels, not just for you, but for everyone involved. There's also something important here about trust. When you trust yourself even a little more than you did before, your energy reflects that. You don't grip on as tightly. You don't rush so much. You don't need to fill every moment of silence or prove every point. You allow things to just unfold. And that creates a different kind of interaction, one that's less about performance and more about connection. It's less about getting it right and more about being real. People lean into that, not because it's perfect, but because it's steady. And steadiness is powerful. Steadiness doesn't demand attention, it holds it. It doesn't force outcomes, it allows them. And that's something you can practice, not perfectly, not all at once, but gradually. Noticing your state before you enter a room, adjusting your pace, letting go of any unnecessary pressure, choosing presence over performance, even in the tiny moments. Because over time, that becomes your default. You stop needing to get ready to be someone else. You just arrive as yourself. And everything changes then. The way conversations unfold, the way people respond to you, the way you experience your own work. It all becomes less about managing every external detail and more about leading from the inside out. And when you start to see that clearly, you can realize that you've been bringing something into every room all along. The only question then is whether you're aware of what it is. Awareness gives you choice, and choice gives you alignment. And alignment is felt. It's what people respond to. It's not about perfection or performance or control. It has everything to do with presence. And that is where the magic lives. Thank you for listening to Creative Imperfections. Always remember, there's magic in the mess. If you enjoyed this episode, share it, subscribe, and keep showing up for your beautifully imperfect journey. Until next time.